Good morning and welcome to today's webcast, Construction Process Reviews, Get from Strategy to Results. Before we begin, I'm going to play a brief housekeeping video.
Welcome and thanks for joining us. Our webcasts are designed to help elevate your business performance. Transform your future for the better with advisory solutions tailored to your vision and supported by our collective technical resources. Our presentation will start in a few moments. Before we begin, here are a few things to keep in mind. You can customize how you both view our presentation and interact with the presenter. For better viewing, close all other applications and turn up your speaker volume. You can also adjust window size and placement or enter full screen mode using the controls at the top of the window or dragging the bottom right-hand corner to resize. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a series of icons, each relating to a different aspect of our session. You can download the group attendance sheet and a PDF copy of today's slides from the slide deck and handouts widget. You can ask our presenter questions during the webcast by typing a question in the Q&A window and clicking Submit. We'll do our best to answer all questions during the presentation or follow up via email. If you experience technical difficulty during today's presentation, refresh your browser by hitting the F5 key. As a reminder, the presentation you're about to see is not legal, investment, or accounting advice. We encourage you to seek the counsel of a professional service provider to apply this content to your specific circumstances.
And as we get started, I wanted to highlight that Baker Tilly and Moss Adams have joined forces to create something greater, one firm with the resources, expertise, and vision to better serve the middle market. To learn how we're unlocking opportunities for businesses, please visit our website via this link in the slide deck and handouts widget. This is more than a merger, it's a multiplier. And with that, I'm pleased to introduce today's presenters from our construction and real estate advisory practice. Stephen Bacchetti, Principal, and Isabella Risucci, Senior Manager. And Steve, I'll turn it over to you to get us started.
All right, thank you, Emily. Hey everyone, my name is Steve Bacchetti and I'm a leader within our capital projects and real estate advisory team. A little background on our group: we perform well over 100 construction and lease audits, in addition to process reviews for both project owners and real estate programs, in addition to contractors, with the goal of helping them improve project controls, cost compliance, and collectively as a team, we have over 1,000 of these types of projects under our belt, and hoping that today's presentation will help provide kind of the expertise and subject matter intel to help you with your capital program. We have a great session lined up and look forward to covering the learning objectives,
Good morning, everyone. My name is Isabella Risucci. As I was introduced, I'm a senior manager here at Baker Tilly. My background before coming to the firm is I was a commercial real estate manager. So all things leasing, budgeting, reporting, TIs, capital improvements, I was doing the work. So it is great to speak with you. And now here at Baker Tilly, I help advise on those projects. And so let's go ahead and get into our objectives for the day. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the market. We want to make sure that as you're reading your news, whether you're reading newspapers, you're online, what should you be looking out for? Any buzzwords, things that you should pay special attention to. We're going to look at the critical stages of your construction program and the overall project life cycle, and talk about how a process review can help improve and add value at each of those phases. We'll identify a couple of common risk factors and exposures that can undermine your project success and talk a little bit about strategies that can help mitigate them. We'll also be exploring best practices for evaluating those processes, like tell you how we actually get these process reviews done, and basically the then takeaways. And we're going to look at the takeaways in terms of your deliverables, what you're going to get out of these projects, but then also look at a couple case studies so you can see exactly what the issues were, how we came in, how we planned our project, and then what those clients were able to derive. Steve, maybe tell us about the industry.
All right. Before we get into the details of the presentation, we'll just do a general overview of the state of the industry. Let's kick things off with the tariffs and trade policies. Lately, tariffs on steel, aluminum, and other materials have really driven up raw material cost. Plus, with trade agreements changing the import restrictions, prices can be very unpredictable. Because of that, contractors and owners often build in tariff-related cost escalation clauses in their contracts to protect both parties from sudden price jumps. In addition, supply chain delays. We've all felt the impacts of global disruption in the past, longer wait times for key materials, for equipment such as steel and HVAC systems. These delays can really push project schedules out, which mean higher overhead and indirect costs. To stay ahead of these, you got to ensure that the contracts stipulate proactive procurement strategies and alternative suppliers to keep projects on track. Next, let's talk about inflation, interest rates, labor shortages, etc. Inflation is making everything more expensive: materials, labor, subcontractors, you name it. Skilled labor is in short supply, never really recovering from the pandemic, which drives up labor cost and project risk. Interest rates have remained high, even though I think there's some relief in the foreseeable future, causing more costs to finance your projects. Keeping experienced staff and investing in workforce development is really important right now. And finally, many contracts have cost escalation clauses tied to material prices or labor rates. Knowing how to understand and negotiate these areas are critical to protecting your budget. So keep an eye on market indices, help teams spot cost changes early and manage them before they become big problems. And over to Isabella to go over the construction process reviews.
Great. So this is a general, we get a lot of FAQs, like what are these projects? So construction process reviews, we come in, we are objective, we are independent. If you know that you're like, I'm not quite sure, a lot of our projects are behind schedule, they're coming in over budget, we kind of see the same problems over and over again, or gosh, that last project didn't go well, but we know that we have a huge project that's going to start soon. We really want to get these kinks worked out either ahead of time or review kind of what happened over the last project and how we can improve. So we're here to come in, independent. We're here to ask questions, just not knowing any sort of background information, and just talk to people, review documents, and help understand, where those improvements can be made. So it's about coming in and being objective. We will come in and we'll review your process. And when I say process, I'm talking about from start to finish. So from that initial idea of, hey, we want to expand, we're looking to build, we need to turn this space over, we need to make improvements here, we're making, we're doing a whole brand reorg and we need to get into all of our stores or locations, or it's just, hey, we're finally opening a larger, location. We can come in, we'll look at your policies and procedures. We want to make sure that we're getting into just the weeds and from start all the way to close out. We want to make sure that as you come back and you're reviewing projects, that you're getting the same documents that you need in order to make sure that you're learning from your projects, and that when you have to go back or make repairs or things like that, that all your ducks are in a row. And so a couple of common FAQs that we get are, when should these projects be performed? So I kind of said this already. If you know that you're about to start a large construction project, or maybe you don't feel like you're equipped for it, or you're saying, hey, I just want to make sure that we're prepared for it, this is going to be a ton of work, come in at project inception. Some projects, as we know, are multi-year projects. Perhaps you're building a campus. Maybe you built one project, or you got one building up and you're like, hey, what happened there? We can come in at a midpoint before you keep going in your project. We can run it in tandem. That's not a problem. And then also at closeout. So I think I already said this, but as you come to a project close, you're like, wow, that really could have gone better. Let's go back, let's review. And I'll get into how we actually assess this, but a big part of it is sampling. So we will request, that particular project's, all the project documents, change orders, bidding documents. We want to see closeout, procedures, emails, reporting, all of that. And we'll go in and assess and say, hey, this is how this could have gone better. What does it cover? So we're looking at not just, are you managing a project well? I think sometimes people focus on the project managers, who's the boots on the ground. but we're really looking at the overall construction program. So again, talking about that inception, talking about your strategy. Are you thinking about expanding? Are you thinking about reducing? The people, that includes accounting. Accounting is a huge part of taking care of a construction project. You're talking about capitalizing assets, making sure that that's happening as it needs to, talking about making sure that change orders, invoices are being reviewed, that the correct lien releases are attached, making sure that communication between teams like accounting and PMs are aligned and that those communications are flowing. Leadership, making sure that they're aware. We'll talk a little bit more about this in the subsequent slides, but wanting to make sure that the right people are signing off on the appropriate change orders, right? We don't want to have a CEO reviewing change orders for $200, but we do want to make sure that they're in the loop, or a CFO when you're asking for a $250,000 change order. And why is that appropriate? Operations, project delivery. So that speaks to just working in tandem with GCs, making sure that your contracts are strong. Internally, if you are a GC, making sure that you've got your ducks in a row for when you are providing documents. You want to prevent problems later with your clients down the road. So we look at policy controls, cost, schedule, and scope controls. And then what are the benefits? So I feel like this really condenses it down. But yes, overall, improved and enhanced controls, that helps lower risk. Optimized operations. We all know that these projects are long. There's always something that's going to come up no matter how well you plan for it. But it's, hey, what can we plan for? Let's try to mitigate what comes up, right? Cost management, so making sure that the appropriate people have the appropriate eyes on your purse strings, and making sure that you're able to take advantage of savings if you can purchase in bulk, if you're building multiple sites, things like that. And then the appropriate stakeholder visibility. We will often see that when we review the reporting on projects, that some of the details that we would hope to see, like appropriate change order reporting or budget transfers, things like that, are not always well documented. So it's calling that out and making sure that the right people know the right information. And then Steve will talk a little bit about our program and project lifecycle.
All right. And I'll just do a quick overview on the various stages of a program or project lifecycle. I think Isabella made a great note that if you are new to construction or construction expertise is not your core skill set, getting engaged early on is critical to setting the table up correctly. We've been engaged with clients, for example, at the end of construction when the whole program is totally over budget, and it's harder to fix problems once it's all been contracted out. So understand the various stages, the various risks associated with each of the stage, and engaging the right expertise at the right stage is critical. All right. So overall, there's 5 critical stages within a program. There's planning, programming, design, construction, and completion, and closeout. Starting with planning, this is where it all begins. Common steps include performing a needs assessment, aligning funding sources, defining project scope, setting priorities, setting up clear communication channels through regular meetings with key stakeholders. Getting these basics right sets a really strong foundation for a successful program. Next is programming, which is more strategic and long-term in nature. Here, we assist organizations develop master plans, long-range strategies that look 20, 25 years ahead, focusing on sustainable development. Capital improvement plans, or CIPs, can help identify future and current infrastructure needs over a shorter horizon, generally 3 to 5 years or so. And we tie these into those project and funding sources in alignment with the longer term strategies. Programming can also involve staffing assessments, making sure you have the right skill set, the right balance of skill set, whether it's internal or external, procurement strategies, building contractual controls, and making sure scheduling processes are effective. Design is where really the ideas start turning into detailed plans. This phase is critical for identifying potential early risk and ensuring that project scope, budget, and schedule are realistic, aligned, and communicated to key stakeholders. Having the right contract structure, team structure, reporting, and communication strategy is critical to keeping all stakeholders and team members aligned and moving forward. On the next slide, I'll kind of go over some common mistakes in this stage that can really be costly. After design, we enter the construction phase. Here, you're managing the supply chain disruptions that we noted earlier, the cost escalation, expenditure change order review management, effective process reviews during construction help maintain transparency, accountability, and efficiencies, and keeping the project on track despite potential market uncertainties. And then finally, we reach completion and closeout. This stage is where the project wraps up, and you ensure that all contractual obligations are met. The handoffs are performed to the appropriate parties, and any lessons learned are documented and communicated to help improve future projects. So throughout each of these phases, process reviews can add tremendous value by identifying risk early that could undermine the success of the capital program. And we'll explore strategies to mitigate those risks and best practices for evaluating construction processes and controls throughout this presentation. All right, next slide. All right, so here are some common project risk factors. And what I really want to highlight here is it only takes one to cause a really big problem. You can get 9 out of 10 or 19 out of 20 correct, but if you have one misstep, it can really undermine the success or the perceived success of the program. For general contractors, for example, I've seen instances where roles and responsibilities weren't clearly defined from the pre-construction team to the construction team, and project setup was inconsistently performed at the corporate level, which made it impossible to report a major capital project holistically for both the owner and internal stakeholders. From the owner side, we've seen owners sign the wrong contracts. They trusted the contract as provided, didn't engage the right expertise, signed either the wrong contract type, for example, a cost plus versus GMP, or had really poor cost of work definitions that created a lot of gray areas, which resulted in excessive charges and disputes later on. Another one is schedule reporting, which I noted before. In the design phase, that's really where you're starting to formalize the project schedule with the contractor, the operations, et cetera. So we had two instances that I want to highlight here where the facilities team may be in total alignment with the contractor on a realistic project schedule, but it may not be reported to accounting and finance, where we've seen a public company think that a development was going to go live within a certain time period. This was being projected within the performas and SEC filings, and it was 2 to 3 years off from what was realistic. It was a miscommunication. Another one was for a school where they thought the gym and pool were going to be open for the next fall quarter or semester, and operational planning had already begun. However, when you talk to facilities, they were really aware that it was another year out before they did it, which caused a major disruption. So really understanding the design phase, the reporting requirements to key stakeholders is critical to ensuring that all project stakeholders are on the same page of where the projects are at from a budget, quality, schedule perspective. So really just going through these process reviews at the various stages, we're able to evaluate these key or common risk factors and making sure that you're set up for success. And with that, I will pass it over to, first polling question. So Emily, I'll pass it over to you.
All right, thanks. Our first polling question today: which aspect of your construction process do you find most challenging? And your options are A, contract and change order management, B, budgeting and cost controls, C, procurement and vendor selection, D, reporting and compliance, or E, staffing and resource allocation. So I'll give everyone a few moments to respond. To participate in our polls, please click the answer you choose and hit submit.
And there's only one right answer on this. Just kidding.
And it's another moment here.
Do you have a guess,
right,
Steve? What do you think?
Go ahead.
I think it's going to be change orders.
I'm going to say budgeting.
All right, let's go ahead and take a look.
Oh, we're even. Okay,
Wow.
That's pretty good. I love it.
That's pretty good. Yep, I think this kind of highlights. Yeah, I think this really highlights like any one of these issues can really be an issue, and I think change orders is where things aren't managed appropriately, or we've seen change orders, multi-million-dollar change orders, not being communicated and really disrupting total budget consideration, which ties into budgeting. We've seen, I can't tell you how many organizations we go into, and every project is perfectly on budget. And what they're doing is they're transferring budgets internally to the projects that are having the overruns, which is poor reporting for a capital program. But really, any of these can be completely disruptive to an organization. I've seen staffing where they have too many internal staffing, where it really causes either project overruns from a contractor perspective or an owner perspective. And I've also seen parties that over staff augment and they don't have the right monitoring controls, and projects can go very south. So I think change orders and budget are very, very common. And it looks like it's funny that we both guessed opposite ones. And I can't tell you last time I've seen it go perfectly split. So that's funny. But yeah, any of these can really undermine a program. So great feedback all. So I'll pass it over to Isabel.
Awesome. Yeah, Steve and I like to keep tabs on who's right about various things, and I think that's the first time we've ever tied. So I might have to ask Emily for that screen cap and save it to my desktop for later, where I save all the other screen caps of Steve and email and things when he tells me that I was right. But all right, let's go ahead and get into common areas that we're looking at. So like I said, we're talking about comprehensive reviews, but it's like, what are we talking about? And I also want to say before I dive into these that often when we are approached, just like that poll identified, there's usually an area where the person who is bringing their concerns to us is most concerned about, right? They're like, I really want to make sure that you're diving into what's happening on our change orders, or I just feel like our bidding's not going well. Or, we don't have a formal procurement department and I feel like there's some issues there, or just there's obviously an area that is of most concern. And so when we start to scope these projects, we work in partnership with you to figure out, okay, what are the exact deliverables that you need? We're going to go over that a little bit later in this, but it's like, what do you want us to look at? Who are the right people? Every part of this, when we're developing our interview lists, who do you want us to speak to? We work with you to make sure that we're gathering the most insightful information from the right people so that your questions are answered, but then you also still get a review of other parts of the overall process and some recommendations that maybe you weren't even aware of are potentially areas of risk. So common areas that we like to evaluate in general, just obviously current program management. So how are these structured, right? Just what's happening staffing wise, fee wise, overall, just program. Best practices for procurement of contractors and professional services. We will sometimes see that clients are sort of going back to the same contractors over and over again, or perhaps if they're in multiple markets, they kind of just find someone and stick with them locally. Or they're not getting triple bids, things like that. And so we'll always highlight, we understand sometimes there need to be quick business decisions that are made, but always wanting to call out, always make sure that you're getting those 3 bids. Every couple of years, you've got to go out to bid, just make sure, price check, that's just for the health of your business overall. Master planning procedures and controls. So I've often found that it's, if a client's primary business is unrelated to construction and their improvements, things like that often isn't considered as a part of their overall strategic plan. But if you're talking about expansion, or if you want to decrease, your locations or things like that, this is a part of your strategic plan. And so wanting to make sure that we can help incorporate language or areas that can go to that overall plan, we can assist there. Material specification standards, we just helped a client that is operating in 3 different markets, and in each market they have a different overall, they're realizing that their procurement is not aligned. So they're ending up with different finishes in different markets, in different buildings between markets. And so their overall brand is not cohesive, and that's causing some concern for them. Construction project delivery methods and contract type selections, wanting to make sure that you are, if you can, using AIA contracts, that you're using guaranteed maximum price, GMP contracts. We can review those. If you have, we'll review whatever your most recent contract is, look for those controls, and then maybe advise switching over to switching over to maybe a different type of contract type here. And then I can see in the chat, someone has a question about GMP. Steve, do you want to take that quick?
Sure. So the question was, a large organization uses GMP contract. So a GMP contract is a guaranteed maximum price contract. Common contracts we see organization use: lump sum, cost plus, guaranteed maximum price. Our favorite contract type is the guaranteed maximum price contract, which is cost plus a fee with a ceiling, which is the guaranteed maximum price. Guaranteed maximum price contracts are good, but it's critical. I think there's 2 considerations: is the construction delivery methodology. So if it's a design build, making sure that you have good cost of work definitions around like sub-buyout savings, for example, and making sure that, to Isabella's point, if you have 3 bids, that you kind of have those requirements at key sub levels, and then any savings from estimates, you're getting that benefit. We see a lot of organizations where they have a design build process where the contractor is creating the estimate. So they're having a larger estimate, for example, and then if the subs come in less than that estimate, they're getting that benefit from a contingency pool perspective. So I think making sure that you understand the construction delivery methodology type and the contract type, and then for the GMP, just making sure you have really strong definitions. So like, are you using actual cost versus rates? Rates could be excessive, so we generally recommend actual costs with not to exceed limitations on labor burden. If they're being self-perform, if there's any self-perform work, making sure that's on a not to exceed basis with strong cost work definitions within that self-perform work. Owned equipment, making sure there's caps, owner approval requirements, et cetera. So I think having a GMP is a great start, but making sure you have the controls built in place within that contract type to support compliant, transparent, accountable charges to your program. So great question. And sorry to kind of go midstream, Isabella, but back over to you.
No, I think that's great. I think it's topical, and it's always nice to know that people are hearing us as we're speaking. So no, thank you for that question. Going back to just like where we're looking, your policies, procedures, and this is a really big one, the authorization matrices. So often in our recommendations, we'll talk about a RACI matrix. I think a lot of people are familiar with them. Some of our clients are not at all. RACI stands for who is responsible, accountable, who needs to be considered and informed when it comes to all tasks related to construction. And so we will often find that in our interviews that certain departments wish they were more in the know at different parts of the project, or they wish they were copied on certain communications just to kind of keep up with timing, things like that. And so we will help identify either the need for an improved RACI matrix if they already kind of have a communication plan, the need to create a RACI matrix, which is also something that we can assist with. And further, another authorization matrix that we will often recommend or identify the need for, that could either be, again, improved, updated, or even created, is that financial authority matrix. So who should be signing off of certain dollar values and certain change orders? Because who can decide when there's a design change, what kind of design change, how much should project managers be able to authorize themselves if there are well-defined contingencies in place. When we get to the our first case study, I believe, I'll talk about probably one of the worst change orders that I've ever seen happen that was completely undocumented and really brought a project askew. But we'll get into that in just a second. But wanting to make sure that you have policies, procedures for, what happens if this happens, and what is our procurement policy, and are there limits involved? Talking a lot about design and construction timelines, which include benchmarking to industry standards. Obviously, it depends on if certain benchmarking is applicable to your project, but wanting to make sure that, if you say that a project's going to take this amount of time and it's not, why? And identifying if those timelines can be improved or they're just not realistic, if construction isn't perhaps like your business's main, it's not something that's familiar to you. Change order procedures and results. I will say that I don't think we've ever done a process review where we didn't have a recommendation surrounding change order and change order management, whether it's the form needing more detail, needing more visibility to the right people, or just overall keeping track of them. Sometimes change orders are proposed in succession. You get a bunch of potential change orders for, 10 through 15, but then only number 11 gets executed. But then when you're looking back, there's no documentation about what happened to the other change orders. So it looks like there are potential change orders. So it looks like there are gaps, and that can cause confusion and concern. And wanting to make sure that decisions on whether one moves forward or not, why? And then also understanding the source of the change orders themselves. Is this driven by, the designers? Is this a ownership decision? Is this, hey, we opened the wall and discovered that there's mold everywhere? So really wanting to make sure that as change orders are reviewed, you have the most information documented and making sure that we're keeping track of these things. Another big one that we love to kind of dive into is just reporting. We often see that either reporting needs to happen more frequently. Sometimes there's monthly reporting. I remember we had a client that only reported on projects every 6 months, which we felt like in our recommendation just wasn't frequent enough for how much construction that they were doing. And then that obviously, it's just too much time. So by the time that the information is getting to stakeholders, it's a little too late to come in and kind of course correct. So we'll often talk about frequency, who should be involved in those meetings, what topics should be covered in the reporting, and then what are the key performance indicators. You've got budgets, forecasting. Steve talked about it earlier. Are there budget transfers occurring? Those are all things that we would want to see included in reporting. We've had clients where reporting is manual. It's usually pulling reports from one system, pulling project photos and things from the PMs, maybe from Procore, if your projects are being managed through there, and kind of making a manual report. We've also seen some projects with pretty sophisticated project management software where it kind of spits out a report that's pretty much good to go. And so we have a lot of different recommendations depending on the environment that our clients are operating in. We can suggest some improvements to either type of reporting, or also make suggestions of, hey, you've got a lot of systems that are talking to one another. It's taking your project managers or whoever's responsible for reporting a significant amount of time to pull these together. And that often, by the time that a report goes out, the data is old, essentially. So sometimes we'll identify the need for, hey, when you have time, you could probably benefit from like a software selection of something that could be improved if your frequency of projects and your size of projects is going to continue to be at the rate that it currently is, because right now this is causing a delay for your projects. You want to make sure that, in a perfect world, I would say it's great I would love for all of our clients to be able to log in to their project management system, likely tied into their accounting system, and see exactly where their project budgets are at based on the last check run that happened. I know that that's not always possible, but we can help you kind of get there. Project budgets and program performance and forecasting. I feel like we've covered this a lot, but making sure that your budgets are accurate, the right people are involved. I think sometimes we'll find that we will hear a common feedback. Well, common feedback we receive in interviews is, oh yeah, I'm just a PM. I get handed the project and I kind of just have to make do with what I've got. So there's a disconnect between the people who are planning projects, budgeting projects, and the people who are actually executing them. And so sometimes it will say, I wish I could be involved more in the budgeting process, or I could tell them, hey, that's not going to work here because this is this type of building and this is what happened on this last job. And so just making sure that the right people are brought into the right time so that budgets are, or maybe it's a recommendation about, hey, you have an initial budget, but before they're finalized, it gets re-reviewed, you get a couple hard bids. And just making sure that your budgets are as close as they can be. We know budgets always, no budget is perfect, but that's just a big one that we also tend to see a lot of feedback on. And then just general overall transparency of the program. So making sure that nobody feels left out. And I want to say that, obviously you don't want every single department involved in every single phase for every single decision or communication, but making sure that if you have a team that's out or like a real estate team who's identifying potential sites. We have a client right now where their team is very aggressive on their real estate. If they see a good opportunity because they have a unique need, they need a lot of land, they'll go ahead and act on it. But then they bring in the designers and architects and people later down the road after they've already made the investment. And then suddenly we've learned that they will often realize that it wasn't a wise acquisition. So then they will end up putting that land that they purchased for sale again. And, it's sort of, if those people had been brought in at the right time, it could have just been hey, that's not a great fit for us. And it's because there's a disconnect between their levels of expertise. And so we just worked on that report. It went out and we just said, hey, when you're working like for the strategy piece, you've got to involve your planning, some of your design people, because they'll be the first ones to tell you like, hey, that's not going to work for this. This equipment isn't going to work on this type of land, for whatever reason. I'm not an engineer, but it's important that the right people are brought in at the right time. Just general transparency for all things. I'm going to kick it back to Emily next. I know, Emily, you've got the next poll. I know the poll's next.
Yep. We got our next polling question here.
Okay, there it goes.
What is your primary role in construction projects? And your options are A, project manager, B, procurement and contracting, C, executive or leadership, D, finance, accounting, or E, other. So I'll give everyone a couple seconds to think on this. And for those of you that would like a copy of today's slide deck, you can download them from the folder that says slide deck and handouts. We will also be sending the slides via email after the webcast. Just a couple more seconds here. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the results. Back to you.
All right. I feel like that makes sense, right? The people who ultimately see the bottom line. Where is this money going? What can we control? How can we get these projects back on track, more on budget, things like that. Steve, any thoughts?
Nope, I totally agree. And I'm assuming the other is probably internal audit, would be my guess.
Great. Well, I know our next slide is just talking about, okay, so what are we actually doing? We've met with you, we understand your concerns. How do we gather the information? How do we collect the data to where we can confidently make these recommendations to you? I've said it a little bit during this already, but number one is we conduct interviews with staff and departments. Ideally, this is again unique to your organization, but we would probably expect to speak with some of the project managers, people in leadership, usually CFO, potentially a CEO, COO, just, what's your connection to the projects? What do you wish you had more information about? Sometimes people in procurement or purchasing, if those are separate departments. I will also say that sometimes our recommendation is that a purchasing or procurement department may need to be created. We'll sometimes talk to project admins, right? That's sometimes a catch-all for a lot of the work that goes on. So we want to hear like, hey, how are things from your perspective? If you have an in-house design team, in-house architect, we want to hear from them. Hey, where do you fit in on this? Whoever's doing the estimating, we want to definitely talk to them. And we've even had instances where if a client is outsourcing project management or any part of their work, we'll actually also speak with the external support, just saying like, hey, you're an outside party. What are you seeing where issues could be improved? Things like that. But we develop our interview list with you. We will sometimes do group interviews. Like if you have a large organization, there are a lot of project managers. We'll sometimes interview 3 project managers at once that maybe work in the same region. But a lot of these are usually single interviews, and we always do them in pairs on our side. So we have duplication, right? 2 people hearing, are we hearing the same things like that. So we can compare notes as we begin to start kind of drafting our preliminary findings or observations. We will evaluate your decision-making framework and reporting. So how do we actually gather the information? We like to sample everything. So we will pick a project or 2 projects and we say, give us everything related to this project: the budget, the bids, the closeout documents. We want to see your insurance. We want to see contracts, change orders. We'll kind of basically from start to finish observe what's happening. And then also on the decision-making side, we'll ask, do you have a RACI matrix? Do you have a financial authority guide already? Do you have any policies and procedures that are already documented just related to your construction program? We want to see it all. So we'll review all of that. Kind of going through, just talked about that. We want to look at your contracts. That would also come up in sampling. Any of your basic forms. So do you have preferred change order forms? Could they be improved upon? We'll look at that. Reporting. Hey, send us you said that you do monthly reporting, quarterly reporting, send those to us. That's how we start to identify like, hey, these KPIs should be included. We noticed that this isn't happening. You mentioned that this is going to this group of people, and we think that this group of people should be included. I know I just hit on the sampling of projects, research best practices. So this is really important to me if your organization is potentially unique. So I'll say that we've done a couple of these projects related to like local municipalities. And so sometimes we'll say, hey, we went out, we looked, we did some best practice, and your sister cities, A, B, and C, they incorporate this into their strategic master plan. And this is publicly available data. We'll pull it and we're able to kind of provide that. So we'll do those benchmarking exercises if appropriate to show, hey, this is what the procurement policy of someone who is just like you has available. And this is what you could probably take from that. And this is where maybe we would see improvements, things like that. I spoke about this before, but assessing that your existing technology and software capabilities, and is there integration? So I think this is really important from an accounting perspective and then also reporting perspective. I think oftentimes our clients will hire a general contractor, and then during the course of a project, they rely on the contractor to take the OAC notes, to take photos, to kind of provide that reporting. And I think that that's great, but I don't think it can be the only project reporting. I think internally there needs to be, just you have your own environment, what your stakeholders need to see. So how can you pull from that, leverage it? Do you have technology that is current? Like, can you run current reports? We had it was a problem I shared earlier, but we had a client who, by the time that they were everything was done in arrears, but almost by 2 months. And so by the time that leaders were reading reports, it was so far out and old information. And so they weren't really able to be strategic or make decisions or act. And it always felt too late. And so when you identify finally that there's a concern, but then as we know, there's a supply delay, oh, sorry, we're 10 weeks out on that, but we're already 8 weeks behind on this even being an issue simply because of reporting. That's how you start to have those misses in schedule. And then evaluating, we've got the internal and external reporting. All right, let's keep it going. And then Steve, I think you wanted to talk about questions that you should be asking for controls.
Yep. And I just wanted two points. got me thinking from the last slide. I think for technology or software implementations, I think a lot of people, when they hear that word, they're like, that's going to be very expensive. I just want to highlight there are a lot of inexpensive options to tie together different data sources to provide really smart dashboard reporting. And then the other note I just wanted to highlight is the supply chain disruption. I think the same client that Isabella was talking about, the project got pushed out and operations wasn't notified of the reporting because it wasn't available. And they hired people months too early for the grand opening that was going to occur. So from an operational standpoint, they really, they misfired from a reporting perspective across all the channels that need to know. So even though the supply chain issue that happened, things like this happen, but I think if the right parties knew of that issue, it could have been, the risk could have been mitigated, or decisions could have been made differently to avoid kind of excessive charges to the program. Okay, so questions you should ask about controls. These are just some of the questions. I think it's critical when you go in, when we do the process reviews, we're really looking for a project that went really well, a project that maybe needed some help, and maybe one of your bigger projects that's in the works now that we can get ahead of some of the risks. So really we're trying to ask for, how do we know that your contract had the most favorable pricing and control? So there's one client that comes to mind. They signed over a $500 million lump sum agreement. And when I was asking this question of like, hey, how do we know that it was 500 million was the right number, not 499 or 501? They kind of noted that they did a competitive bid process and they had two bids, and there was no construction cost estimates in it. They just had what the fee would be, what the insurance rate would be, and I think that was about it. There was no construction cost element. So from our perspective, we can't tell you that you got a good price on that. Just from a very, it was a competitive process, but it wasn't the best competitive process. They didn't have good project controls to make sure that the estimates for the subcontracts weren't excessive. So like some buyout saving controls, et cetera. So when we go through these projects, we ask the questions and then we kind of ask for the support to make sure that we understand what the current environment is and where things can be improved. Isabella touched on project approval of project design, construction budget, spending. I can't tell you how many times project design may be not templated or not templated a way that organizations can manage effectively. So there's one school district that comes to mind that they had different systems at every site, and it made it very difficult for maintenance and operations to manage all those different material specifications. So having a RACI matrix kind of defining who needs to be a part of the process, having material specification logs with allowable deviations with the right parties approving that is critical, making sure that you're executing your capital program in a consistent or consistent-ish way that meets kind of your overall objectives. Next, the RACI matrix, I think it's critical. It's just not kind of a finance and accounting thing. It really needs to go across all the different departments that are involved within the capital program. It could include risk management, internal audit, legal, key outsourced parties, et cetera. And I won't go through all these because I know we're getting close to time, but yeah, so I think these are just some of the questions we ask, and we're really looking for who's making who's making the decisions. Are those the appropriate parties? How are those decisions being communicated across the organization in a strategic way to make sure everyone's lined up to support a successful project and or program? And over to Isabella.
Great, thanks, Steve. So now we have our couple of case studies for recent clients that we help support. So first we have, this is a specialty food grocer, expanding crazy, like 20 to 30 stores a year is their goal, which is great. But they are in multiple markets. They were lacking some in-house expertise as it comes to grocery. We identified all of their projects. There was not one that was not coming in under budget or on budget. And it was really because they're growing so fast, they're going into like former Bed Bath and Beyond, things like that. That takes time to turn that into a grocery store that's going to have a ton of refrigeration, things like that. I think the biggest red flag for this project came for, or I want to say there's two. It was number one, estimating, because they were going so quickly. They're going into new markets where they've never been. They were just relying on their project managers to get the bids that they need and get going. So not taking the time to triple bid, and also not managing their change orders well. I think we sampled 2 of their builds, and we found that almost all of their change orders, some of them were missing. Almost all of them were not signed off by, in theory, the right person that should be. And that there were also some change orders that just did not exist, but the essence of a change order occurred. And so this is the case study that I was referencing earlier. Someone on their executive leadership team said, for that particular store, we're going to have a pizza oven. I don't care, make it happen. And the team did, but that increase in cost really surprised the rest of the leadership down the road. And a lot of change orders we found being approved verbally. So there just wasn't great documentation. And this is also the same client who had that lag in reporting. And so things were getting done, stores that were opening, it was happening, but behind the scenes, there was a lot of chaos. So we came in and advised on quite a few different controls. And we ultimately recommended we actually did further help them with monthly performance reporting support. So we took over some of their reporting for a couple of months, just pulling together their various reports from accounting and PMs and kind of showing them what their reporting should look like. We identified what their policies what the policies they need are, and helping them later kind of put those together, assisting with change order reviews, and then talking about we recommended the RACI matrix, things like that, for staffing and communication improvements. Similarly, case study 2, I won't touch on this one too much. This was a very big life sciences client. They're global, and they work in medical robotics. And so they just do a ton of projects. So they're building basically manufacturing sites for their equipment. And a lot of their projects were, again, over budget and off schedule, right? It's the same story over and over again. But we needed someone from the outside. There were a lot of internal discussions of what the issues were, and things were not being addressed. So they came to us because they say, you don't know anything about our organization. Come in, you tell us what's going on. We ended up giving them 14 recommendations and also assisted with process mapping support. Because they were a global entity, there was a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And this particular client, almost every call we were on had over 10 people, mostly from their side. And so we kind of needed to come in and help with that mapping of, okay, this is who's talking to who and when, and, is that correct? Where could improvements be made? But yeah, a lot of interdepartmental communication was key for this particular client. Okay, Emily, let's launch our last poll. And then I know I'm just going to round us out, I think, after you come back.
All right, our last poll. What are your organization's plans for construction-related growth or expansion in the next 1 to 3 years? Your options are A, significant expansion with multiple new projects planned. B, moderate growth with a few projects in the pipeline. C, maintain current project levels with no major expansion. And D, reduce construction activities. So we'll give everyone a second to think on that. If you do have questions for our presenters, please submit them in the Q&A window. Should we run out of time for questions, we'll be doing our best to follow up with you after the webcast. Just another couple seconds here.
And one of my favorite restaurants is on this webinar, so I hope they answer A.
Yes.
All right, let's go ahead and see what they had to say.
All right. Pretty even, or like relatively even. All right. Let's keep going, Steve. I want to make sure we hit our time. When to consider a process review, Steve?
Okay, I'll keep this short and sweet. So I find early engagement those are our favorite projects. I think that's where we're able to kind of assess the lay of the land, understand the expertise, understand the policy environment, authorization matrix environment, the RACI matrix environment. And I think if you set the stage up and you get engagement you get the buy-in from the team and get the right expertise at the table, it helps you throughout the project significantly. I just can't tell you how many times organizations will come to us after contracts are signed, after they're midstream on the construction project, after they're encountering change orders, and they're asking us to help or where could they have gone better, but the damage has already been done. So I think the early engagement is critical. So if you have a new bond program or you're getting a big project in the works, it's not bad to just have a routine process review, making sure everything is set. And if there's any areas for opportunities for improvement, to get those recommendations out there so that you can avoid some of these common pitfalls that we see at many organizations. So yeah, I'll pass it over to Isabella. I know we got a slide or two more and just want to have enough time for any for those slides.
Perfect. Thanks, Steve. So I know I talked about the general idea of a process review, what we're looking at, right? Like, okay, these are the areas we're going to get into. Then also talking about how do we do it? Interviews, best practice research, review of your own contract documents, construction documents, all project related documents, also your organization's policies and procedures, anything related to the construction that you're doing. So that's how we gather our information. But then what is your end product? What do you walk away from? These are your deliverables. So number one, first and foremost, you get a report. You get our observations and you get our recommendations. So I would say that we usually have between 10 to 16 is probably average. We have done some where there's more. We have done some where there's less. And again, that depends on us scoping the projects with you. Within our reports, we always include an implementation plan. So we take every observation as, the experts, we assign what we think is the most appropriate risk rating. So we say, this is critical, this is low priority, this is where we think you should, as you walk away from this, where you should focus your time. That gets reviewed by you. Obviously, ultimately, a business decision, risk ratings can be addressed or be adjusted. But in that, we have our recommendation, the risk rating, and then you take that and you fill it out. We have management response, we have timeline, and we also include in that the potential issues if these areas are not addressed. So it is meant to be a tool that you can take and start to use with your leadership and say, all right, over the next 2 years, we're going to start working on this. Who's going to build out the RACI matrix? Who's going to work on these policies and procedures? How are we going to improve our bid forms? Let's start working on these things. I talked about that with that client that we were helping. We can assist with that. Construction forms. We have a really amazing creative services team. So if you're like, I don't even know where to start. What is the best change order form I could have? We can help produce that for you. And if you allow us access to your branding, our creative services team will quickly brand it and you can put those forms into use right away. And then presentation to leadership. So in addition to our report, we can always put together a PowerPoint where we go through our recommendations, either a long presentation like this, it can be 10 minutes, but if you want certain information to get in front of the right people, we can help you with that. Okay, and then Steve, I think we're just talking about briefly moving forward. Where do we go from here?
I think we're basically just saying if you have a major capital project or major program in progress, make sure that you have the right expertise or outside support to help you execute your program successfully. Assess your staffing models, review your policy procedures, look for opportunities for improvement. These projects are not intended to be like, we got you. It's, hey, here's a control that could be improved to support you execute your program in the most efficient and effective way. So the goal is process improvement and the culture of continuous improvement. So with that, hope you guys all learned some from the presentation. We're here as a resource. So reach out if you have any questions or concerns within your program, and hope everyone has a great day.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Isabella and Steve, for a great presentation today. As I mentioned earlier, if we didn't have time for your questions, we'll do our best to follow up with you after the webcast. And here is a link to an online survey where you can provide feedback for today's presentation. Please take a moment to complete this survey, as your feedback is very important to us. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll join us again next time.